All right, looking back on what I've read recently, I've read some by popular horror authors. They had some recent releases this year. I'm like, hey, I've liked your book in the past. Let's give it a try. Stupid, Jessica. Why? Just because it's a popular horror author doesn't mean I need to read it, but apparently I think it does, and it does not go well for me. We're going to start with one that actually went half decently, and that's being Stephen King. It's a short story collection, You Like It Darker. I don't like short story collections. The only reason I picked this up was because I know it's going to be on the Goodreads Choice Horror nominee, whatever. Probably going to win it. I read the top 10 past couple years, and let's just get this out of the way now. I don't like short stories very often, but I actually enjoyed this one. I was pleasantly surprised. Not every short story in this, but I'd say at least half, and even the ones I didn't like had a moment that was creepy, that was eerie, that had imagery that stuck with me, and for that reason alone, this probably 3-star, maybe 4 if I'm being generous, book was the best of the popular horror authors that I read recently. So way to go, Stephen King. He needs no introduction. You know what books he's written. My favorites of the short story collection being ones involving a man who, for no other way to explain it, meets a psychic slash sideshow person that knows the answer to everything. Whatever you ask him, he will give the answer of. And you only have like a few minutes to ask as many questions as you can. And you waste most of that time with him just proving that he does know everything. And then how his life changes with the knowledge that he has gained from these conversations. So that one, probably my favorite. There's a story where a man has a dream of a dead body and keeps having the same dream. And when he sees that there is a dead body there, well, how do you call the police and reveal this location without making yourself look like the murderer turning themselves in? Like, how do you say, I had a psychic dream, hey, cops, go to this location, and it goes from there. There's one with a carjacking on the way to a sick relative, possibly going to end up being a funeral. Like, there are so many little short stories here that I genuinely really, really enjoyed. But yeah, the rest of these that I've read did not enjoy. I got through them, but it was a little bit of a struggle. Stephen Graham Jones, very popular horror author. I genuinely enjoyed The Only Good Indians. Had a new one come out, I Was a Teenage Slasher, and I was not set up to like this. What I love from a story are characters who drive the narrative, that the choices they make, the decisions that they make, is what is driving the narrative. I like a strong narrative with characters with a strong personality that are driving the story forward. This is very much meta horror, which I do tend to like, but not like this. The idea of through supernatural hijinks, getting turned into a slasher. And in this world, like, a slasher is both a curse and a superpower, and it does really, really creative things with that idea. Like, you pick up a chainsaw, even if it's dead, it's going to start. It comes with sound effects, just in regular day. You pick up a knife, it goes whoosh. It gets like a slashy noise to it. Or you can get super speed so long as nobody's looking at you, so you can appear wherever you need to be. Bonus points if you walk with a limp. So there are moments like that I genuinely really enjoyed and loved, but the fact that the premise of this book is the now slasher and his best friend trying not to kill his classmates around him, trying to prevent the massacre that they know is coming because he's a slasher. So he has to be a slasher, and they don't know how to stop him. It's taking all the agency away from these characters because it's not their decision to go on a murder spree. So there's no motive to the killing. There is an inciting incident at a party, but it's not his choice to act this way. It's like a curse put upon him. And you can't not see the similarities with the title with I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and that one has a strong focus. It's been talked to death about themes involving around puberty. This here novel also has a coming of age kind of story, but going from young adult into adulthood. They're about to graduate high school, looking into universities. What does the future hold for them? And he's very much feels like an outsider, that he's not very book smart. He doesn't know what will become of his life. So there might be some kind of themes involving feeling trapped in a path, things like self-fulfilling prophecy, where he feels like his life is written out for him. He's just going to end up at a dead-end job kind of thing. So maybe the idea paralleling, well, a slasher has to act like this. I am, is it Tully? Something like that. So I have to act like this. Like he's putting these pressures on himself? Maybe, not really, because not very many people treat him as worthless, like this is how your life is going to go. He's just kind of a quiet kid. So it doesn't really work, but the story also has strong themes, like steeped in grief after losing a parent, the unknown of the future, the fear he has, the isolation, feeling like an outsider. Again, steeped in grief. The family has been through trauma, and definitely enjoyed that element of the story. It's extremely well written. I can see people loving this book. It is just the lack of agency for the characters that made it not my personal preference. But this was a well-written book, and I know a lot of people will love it. I'll also say, like, while the characters didn't feel like they had agency, as they are stuck to the tropes and plotline of a slasher movie beyond their control, they have strong personalities as well. They're very well written, especially the son, the mother, and the best friend. Like, love them. Next book we have Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. I believe that's how you say his name. Needs no introduction, okay? He wrote Bird Box. People love this man and his stories. Personally, I wasn't that big a fan of Bird Box, and I was not a big fan of this one either. The beginning is fantastic, flawless. My God, this was one of the closest times I've ever come to fear when reading. This book was terrifying. Full-on jump scares in the beginning. You have this 8-year-old girl, Bella, who has an imaginary friend that lives in her closet. It's called the Other Mother, and it keeps asking her every single night, over and over again, let me into your heart. And it is quite honestly terrifying for the first half. The tension is building and building and building, and you get an epic release. Like, it's really good. And then around the second half, you realize, okay, can we do something with this? Can we do something different? Because it's essentially, monster is chasing us, run to location A. Monster has found us, go to location B. Monster has found us, go to location C. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Like, could we not investigate the idea of imaginary friends, ghosts, demons, spirits, the history of the house, different cultures' interpretation of these kind of ideas? Anything different than what happened previously, because it just feels so repetitive. And by, honestly, really early on, the narrative was starting to grate on me because the entire story is told from 8-year-old Bella's point of view. Sometimes she feels like a 4-year-old, but I'll give you the credit that I'm not around kids very much, so maybe this is how an 8-year-old acts. But by God, if I had to read Mommy Said or Daddo Said one more time, I was going to go insane. The short sentences, being like innocence and naivety of this child, was driving me crazy. I don't know why the entire thing had to be in her point of view, because it also meant that the parents had to have arguments and stuff and talking in front of her rather than in private, because clearly this needed to be conveyed for the narrative, so she had to be present for it. But like, can you not step into another room and have this conversation? Sometimes they did, but she just overheard because they clearly were not whispering. Or they'll talk to her when they think she's asleep. I'm like, you do not talk this way in front of your child, but it did lead to one of the most terrifying scenes. My God, I loved it. And then there's a huge theme on how secrets and conflict in the family, especially between the parents, can lead to trauma and impact on developing minds of the child. And it's a really, 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 really good idea. It just fumbled the ending. Not fumble. It made a choice that I'm like, why would you write this? Why is that how we end this plot point? You also do not get answers. Like, what is this spirit? Where did it come from? What does it want? What will happen if it gets into Bella? Like, answers? No, never heard of it. Didn't know. It's just a creepy situation, a family on the run, fast pace, but like lacking any kind of narrative after the first half, short of run and get caught and run again, and no answers to the mysteries that it sets up. So, fantastic opening, did not stick the landing. Middle of the night, I have a full spoiler review here as I'm reading this book, so it basically tells you the entire plot. But Riley Sagar, my absolute favorite thriller. I love how he takes a trope and just goes with that trope. And usually I love it. But again, I was enjoying this book, and the ending just drops the ball. I'm like, did you like not commit to an ending? It feels so wish-wash, pointless, that everything, literally every page before it, was a red herring, pointless, had nothing to do with the story being told. Very simple premise. Two boys were asleep in a tent in their backyard sometime in the 80s, probably, I think. Tents get slashed. One of the boys is missing when the other one wakes up. No idea what happens to him. 30-ish years later, maybe more than that, I don't know, you're learning the truth of what actually happened. And you go through like 300 pages of occult stuff, mysteries, secrets, creepy people in the town, what dynamics are going on between the people in this very small, close-knit community, only to find out it was all pointless and had nothing to do with anything. I hate red herrings. I will say, though, that the characters in this book were so strongly written. Like, the personalities that nearly every single character in this community, like, even ones that only got, like, a few minutes, pages of screen time, for lack of a better way to phrase it, such a strong personality to them. You understood them, their dynamic with their friendships, their family, their neighbors. I really loved how the characters were written in this story. It's just the plots. I like the plot up till the ending. What was the purpose of reading this if that was the ending? A Talent for Murder. I'm not going to be as angry at this one as I was for its sequel. So A Talent for Murder is Peter Swanson's third book in a series. The first book in the series was A Kind Worth Killing, one of my favorite thriller books of all time. It is my twisty twist book. I recommend it to everybody. The sequel to that, The Kind Worth Saving, is arguably one of the worst books I've ever read, and I don't know how it got past publishing. I'm still convinced it was a thriller that had nothing to do with the original series, and they just changed some names to make it work to be a sequel to the first one. At least this third book, A Talent for Murder, is not terrible. It's not fantastic. It's average. It is an average thriller that has no right to be compared to my favorite thriller, but at least I did not hate this one. Essentially, a wife believes her husband is a serial killer, and you're following her as she's trying to understand this weird feeling she's getting from her new husband. As he goes to different conferences, he sells t-shirts and stuff like that. Now, she enlists her best friends from university, Lily, who we know from the first book. She's a delight, and she actually acts like herself in this book, as she's trying to get information on her husband, on her friend's husband, and figure out who this killer is, looking into information on people who've been killed in these kind of convention areas. Except, at about the halfway point, everything is revealed. It was a solid thriller. Nothing fantastic about it. The character dynamics were interesting. We had some mystery. We had some tension. I was very much wanting to know how the husband was involved in everything that was happening, and who was the serial killer in this situation, if there even was one. Halfway point, you get all the answers. Everything. It's boring and stupid with absolutely no motivation behind it. And then you have the next half of the book with no interesting character dynamics, an overused twist, and I'm just like, can we just not have ended it like 150 pages ago? Because the second half, predictable with no depth to it compared to the first half, which was, again, average at best. And why are we having this in the series with my favorite thriller as the first book in the series? It's not that bad. It's a solid thriller that just so happens to be predictable after the halfway point. Horror movie by Paul Tremblay. I have to give up on Paul Tremblay. I really enjoyed Head Full of Ghosts and Cabin at the End of the World. They were really good, some of my favorite horror novels that I still recommend. But his last, 3 books I have despised. At least this book I did not spend money on. I read it on Scrib. Essentially, we are in 2 different timelines. A indie film group who were making a movie in the 90s-ish. And then present day, you also get the original screenplay that they were using in the 90s. And only one of the actors of this time is still alive, as the movie is being sort of rebooted, but you can't really call it a reboot because the original was never produced to the or released to the public. Only like 3 scenes have been put on YouTube, and it's garnered a cult following, people begging for a full-length film. Now, why is there only one person left alive? What happened to everyone else? Was there a curse? Is the mask haunted? Who knows? Who cares? Is not relevant to the story. Is pretentious as hell, which we expect from Paul Tremblay. That's kind of his writing style. It's acknowledged in the story that this main character is being pretentious, as he's saying horror is so tropey and now it should be highbrow. Like, he's having some meta commentary, but it's coming off as grating, and I'm not enjoying reading it. Character-wise, don't know anything about any of them. They're all interchangeable. One is allegedly depressed, but she didn't ever ever act like it. One's allegedly a rich, spoiled girl, and I don't know, she never really acts like it. None of them had any unique aspects to them in terms of dynamics between the cast of characters. So I got nothing. I don't remember anything about this book from when I read it. I think I originally picked this book up because someone compared it to Heaven, which is a book strongly involved like around bullying, and I still need to read that book for myself, but I'm like, okay, that could be an interesting thing to read about. And it's definitely sort of there in the sense that the script involves a character known as the Thin Man, or the Thin Boy, or yeah, Thin Man, being brutalized by his classmates. And, no, the Thin Kid, that's what it is. Yeah, the Thin Kid being brutalized by his classmates. But it's all acting, so with the consent of the person playing the Thin Kid, except they do want some of the acts to be real. So he agrees to actually participate in, like, a cigarette being burnt out on him. He'll still have the scar in the future. But I guess there's some commentary on, did he really give consent for that to happen? Was there peer pressure? Were they possessed? Did they get lost in the art of filmmaking? Is this an issue of like The Shining, where to get a good response from somebody, you have to psychologically or actually torture them to get this art to be created? Is that a good thing? But it never really feels like it's trying to have that conversation. And on top of that, like, the script is telling you how to feel, so it's like the author is saying, hey, reader, you should be feeling this when these characters are acting this way. I'm like, how about you let your story invoke those emotions instead of telling me I should be feeling this right now? I just really wished it did do something with the idea of this mask that this group of kids found actually was cursed. It brought about calamity and all the bad stuff that happened and befell them. But the fact that there's only one person left alive felt more coincidence than anything nefarious. And we knew from the beginning basically every major thing that would be revealed. We just didn't know the details of what happened in the past. We knew everything that happened in the past, just not like the context surrounding it. So nothing felt new when everything actually played out. It was more a matter of how did this play out. And then nothing of consequence was happening in the present timeline. So I'm like, why am I reading this? Yeah, so those were the popular horror books or popular horror authors that I've read from recently. Did not work out so well for me. I'm going now to switch to just my most anticipated, but given that my most anticipated horror books are mostly based on the cover and title, and I know nothing about the author or the context of the book, I got a feeling it's not going to go too well for me, because clearly I'm not doing very good at picking out books that I'm going to enjoy. So if anyone has any recommendations of horror books with very character focus, with a strong narrative driving the plot, and the characters' decisions are what's driving the plot, I would really love to read them. So leave your favorite horror book below, so maybe I can give that one a try by the time I read my most anticipated. All right, talk to you later. Bye.